The Story of Pocahontas and John Smith by Haley Kubero. The overview. In this presentation, we will explore the legendary figures of Pocahontas and John Smith, whose stories have become one of the most enduring narratives in American history. We will dive into the historical backgrounds, their significant connections, and how their story has evolved over time. Their tale became part of American history and folklore, often blending facts with myths, and continues to inspire numerous cultural works. Who is Pocahontas? Birth. Pocahontas, born around 1595 in what now is Virginia, was the daughter of Powhatan, the powerful chief of the Powhatan Confederacy. Her role in the Powhatan Confederacy. Pocahontas was not just a figurehead. She was deeply connected to her tribes spiritually and cultural practices. She played a role in ceremonial events and helped bridge cultural gaps between the Powhatans and the English settlers. Pocahontas' significance. She was a symbol of hope and diplomacy, partially during the early relationships between Native Americans and the settlers. Her name, Pocahontas, was a nickname meaning playful one, reflecting her lively spirit. Who was John Smith? Birth. John Smith was born in 1580 in England, a man of adventure, exploration, and military experience. Background and early adventures. Before coming to America, Smith had an eventful life, including serving as a missionary in Europe. His travels were marked by battles and even imprisonment. His role in Jamestown. As a leader in Jamestown colony in 1607, Smith became a key figure in its survival. His leadership skills helped to organize the settlers and establish relations with the local tribes, even though the relationships were often tense. The early encounters. The journey to Jamestown. In 1607, the Virginia Company sent Smith and a group of settlers to establish a colony at Jamestown, which became one of the first permanent English settlements in North America. Pocahontas' role. Pocahontas was around 11 or 12 years old at this time and interacted with the English settlers in an informal manner. These early exchanges were largely peaceful, marked by curiosity and occasional trade. However, the full extent of Pocahontas' role is unclear. The role of Native Americans. The Powhatan Confederacy, led by Pocahontas' father, held complex relations with the settlers, with both trade and conflict occurring over the years. The legendary rescue. The rescue story. One of the most famous stories is the rescue of John Smith by Pocahontas in 1607. According to Smith, he was captured by Powhatan's men and brought before Powhatan for execution. At this moment, Pocahontas allegedly stepped forward and saved him by placing her head on his, preventing his death. Controversy and doubt. Many historians have questioned the truth of this story. Additionally, the idea of a young girl saving an adult man may have been a dramatic enhancement later added to Smith's writing. Symbolism. Whether true or not, the story became an enduring symbol of Pocahontas' bravery and her role as a peacekeeper between her people and the settlers. The real relationship. John Smith's accounts. Smith wrote about Pocahontas in his journal and letters, portraying her as a key figure in his survival. He emphasizes her importance in fostering cooperation between the settlers and the Powhatans. Pocahontas' diplomacy. Pocahontas likely played a diplomatic role, making communication and trade between the English and Powhatan's people easy. Cultural exchange. The early encounters between Pocahontas and the settlers could have provided crucial cultural exchanges that shaped the survival of Jamestown. Pocahontas' knowledge of the land and its resources was invaluable to the settlers. Pocahontas' kidnapping. Kidnapped by the English. In 1613, during an escalating conflict between the Powhatans and the English, Pocahontas was captured by the English. They held her hostage in exchange for the release of English prisoners held by Powhatan. Conversion and baptism. While in captivity, Pocahontas was educated in English customs and converted to Christianity. She was baptized and given the name Rebecca. Marriage to John Rolfe. Pocahontas' marriage to John Rolfe, an English tobacco planter, was significant both socially and politically. The union helped cement a period of peace between the Powhatan's Confederacy and the English. The legend versus the reality. Romanticized accounts. The story of Pocahontas and John Smith has been heavily romanticized, partially in books, films, and popular culture. Disney's Pocahontas, 1995, portrays a passionate romance that did not exist in historical reality. The age gap. Historical evidence show that Pocahontas was likely a child or a very young teen when she encountered John Smith, who was in his late 20s. It is unlikely that the relationship was romantic, as portrayed in many modern retellings. Pocahontas in England. Her visit. Pocahontas' journey to England in 1616 was part of her husband's efforts to secure financial support for their tobacco plantation. It was also an opportunity for the English to showcase their success in civilizing Native Americans. The public image. The image of Pocahontas as a civilized Native American was crafted for the English public. Her story was used to promote the success of European efforts. Pocahontas' death. Death in England. Pocahontas' life was tragically short. She died in March 1617 at the age of 21, likely from pneumonia or tuberculosis. She passed away just as she and her family were preparing to return to Virginia. Her legacy. Pocahontas' death marked the end of her direct involvement in the colonial stories, but her legacy lives on. She left behind a son, Thomas, who later became a notable figure in the colonial Virginia. John Smith's later life. Returned to England. After a gunpowder explosion injured him in 1609, Smith returned to England and never returned to the New World. His injuries marked the end of his role in Jamestown's colony. His writing. Smith continued his explorations and authored books about his adventures, including the general history of Virginia, which detailed the early colonial period and his interactions with Pocahontas. The impact on history. Symbolism of Pocahontas and John Smith's story. Their story has been used as a foundational myth in American history, symbolizing the meeting of two worlds. While it represents peace and cooperation, it also underscores the tension between European settlers and Native American tribes. Pocahontas' role in American memory. Pocahontas' legacy is a complex, as she embodies the struggle of Native Americans to navigate a world dramatically altered by European colonization. Myths and realities in popular culture. Disney's Pocahontas, 1995. Disney's animated movie presents a highly romantic version of Pocahontas' life, focusing on a fictional romance between Pocahontas and John Smith. While entertaining, it overlooks many harsh realities, such as violence of colonization. Historical myths. These myths, while captivating, often misrepresented the complete historical events Pocahontas interacts with John Smith. For example, are oversimplified, and the long-term impact of colonization is downplayed in many stories. The key takeaways. The legend. The story of Pocahontas has been romanticized, especially in terms of her relationship with John Smith, creating a simplified view of colonial history. Historical reality. While Smith and Pocahontas may have interacted, the real historical context was far more complex, shaped by politics, survival, and cultural exchange. Cultural significance. Pocahontas' story has become a symbol of intersection of Native American culture and European colonization. Through its oversimplified and complexities of these early colonial dynamics. Conclusion. The story of Pocahontas and John Smith is a fascinating blend of myth, history, and cultural narrative. Over the centuries, their tale has been transformed. However, when we strip away the embellishment, we find that the true story of their interactions reflects a period of cultural conflicts, survival, and adaptation. While Pocahontas is remembered as a symbol of peace and diplomacy, her life was deeply shaped by the forces of colonization, which involves violence, displacement, and the erosion of native cultures.